So next, I'm going to point you to your exam statistics, which we have provided all of fiscal 15 and a couple of months of the fiscal 2016 for your exams. And next is your continuing education statistics with all of your fiscal 2015 and a couple of months of 2016. Any questions?
When you say go out and visit the schools, are you talking about all the schools that y'all oversee, or just cosmetology and?
Well, currently it will eventually get there, because with some of the health services programs, they will have some schools such as massage schools. And so our division will be over the inspection of those, and again, going out and just visiting and looking for best practices and helping out. As far as auction schools, that basically all we're doing there is approving the curriculum. We're not actually approving the school and inspecting the school. We can see these folks also going and visiting the providers, perhaps sitting in on classes and seeing, what's going on.
That was my next question.
Yes.
When you gonna do that?
Well,
Good.
that's in the plan, yes.
Yeah, because I keep
Yes.
hearing there's a lot of continuing education programs out there that's
That will
not
be.
up to snuff.
Marco's, one of his projects he'll take on with his staff when we get going in.
Okay.
So we'll keep you in mind.
And Ms. Sample, Brian Francis, again, one of the big changes is that we ripped the inspection function from the field operations group. So they did all inspections, whether it was a barber shop, a cosmetology salon, or a barber school, cosmetology school, and we brought just the school functions underneath Ray's group. And so it is going to allow us to be a little bit more targeted. We are building some experience and some expertise now specifically on just all things school. So the driver's education is going to be our first focus to get them beefed up and working on those. They'll do the cosmetology schools. And then CE audits really is going to be right around the corner. But I think Ray now, with just an education focus, is really going to allow us to get more done and not have the distraction of doing shops and having the distraction of doing salons. So we think that this division is going to work out.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any questions of Ken? Thank you. Enforcement Division.
These are the tough people, so watch out.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Melder, and I am one of the senior prosecutors in the Enforcement Division. And the report that you have in front of you includes 2 cases for highlight as well as some key statistics. The cases for highlighting, one was an agreed order and one was a default order. An agreed order means that when we sent out the notice saying you've done something in violation of our law and rules, they acknowledge it and they sign an agreement and they start paying us the penalty or abiding by the sanction. The default order is we send out the notice, they do not acknowledge it. We send them a notice saying we are going to sign an order against you. If you don't do anything, they still don't do anything, and we get an agreed or a default order signed by our executive director. In the first case, it was against Ms. Scarlett Westbrook out of Rockwall, Texas, and she had an auction on November 15th and did not pay who she was supposed to pay until January 22nd of the following year. She agreed to pay $1,875 for that violation in payments. She made her first payment before the order was signed. However, she has not paid since then, and she's 3 payments behind, but her license is no longer active, so we'll be going forward with trying to collect that money. The second case was the default order against Mr. Morris Tybell out of Houston. He also had 2 cases where we went after the recovery fund for almost $30,000, the cap, for 2 separate taking items and then not paying for them. He did not respond. We assessed a penalty of $3,000 for a separate case where he advertised a painting as something that it was not, and his license has been suspended for a year as well. Did you have any questions about those cases that I can answer for you?
Is that pending repayment of the recovery fund, or?
No, that's for a separate case. The suspension was for a separate case. The 1-year suspension was for the conducting business in a false, misleading, or deceptive way.
In other words, we can go out and tap, or cause a recovery fund to be tapped for nearly $30,000, and we only get a year suspension.
No, I'm saying those are two separate things.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions?
My question would be, after this year's suspension, then what?
Then he would have to, he did apply to renew, so when his next renewal comes up, which will be during the suspension period, he will have to apply to renew and meet the requirements as well. And then, I'm not sure exactly how the recovery fund part works. Stella, do you know?
Yeah, this is Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel. I believe he's also required to repay the fund within a certain time at a certain amount of interest, and then he could lose his license for not doing that as well, a revocation.
There is no license without repayment of the recovery.
Well, that's my question. You're not about to reissue him a license and start the process all over then?
No, the enforcement part was, I was trying to say they're two separate things. The enforcement part, if he were just suspended for the enforcement case, he would have to continue his renewal, even though he didn't have the license, and then he could get his license once the suspension is lifted. But because of the recovery fund part, which is handled by general counsel, he's not going to get that unless he pays that back.
That answers my question, thank you.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then the last part is just key statistics. As you can see, over the fiscal year, there were 10 cases open, 12 cases resolved, 2 agreed orders, and then the amount of penalties assessed and collected is about on par with the rest of the programs here at TDLR. And I can answer any questions about that if you have any.
Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Financial Services Division.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Jerry Daniels with the Financial Services Division. As of 8:09 this morning, the balance in the Auctioneer Education and Recovery Fund was $389,461.92. The reason that's important is because the balance, and I'll quote from the Act, if the balance in the fund on December 31st of a year is less than $350,000, each license holder at the next license renewal shall pay, in addition to the renewal fee, a fee that is equal to greater of $50 or a pro rata share of the amount necessary to obtain a balance in the fund of $350,000. 2 years ago, the balance was under the $350,000. Well, the last 2 years, it's been under $350,000. So auctioneers renewing their license have had to pay $50 addition into the AERF fund. That will stop as of February 17th, 2016. Now, the reason for the delay is that the renewal notices are sent out 45 to 60 days in advance. So depending on what the balance is at 12/31, the notices don't go out until about 6 weeks later. You have before you, I believe, the history of the last 2 years of the fund. If we have another year like calendar year 2014, we probably won't need to collect the additional fee a year from now either. But if we have another year like we had in calendar year 2015, next year we'll start again. Do you have any questions?
Well, I'm trying to rely on my memory, but I have paid the $50 extra 2 years, and I got a notice for next year that I'm going to have to pay it again. So that's 3 years rather than 2.
When does your license expire?
February 14th.
We'll make sure that people don't pay more than,
Well, you said
don't more than 2 years.
February 17th, so that's 3 days, but
And I think Jerry was saying that because we can't make that final call until December 31st. So if there is a hit between now and then,
Sure.
it could trigger you guys back into it. So
But yeah, the notices going out now are
Correct.
saying 100 for
Yep.
next year's renewal. So in other words, I need to wait a little while.
You should not be your normal self. You should procrastinate. You should be me in this case.
Then you lose your license.
Oh, I don't need a license anymore.
But we're not encouraging others to procrastinate. We think everyone should be timely with the renewal so that there's no interruption in your livelihood, except for Mr. Sample.
Thank you, Brian.
If you just send in the $50, we'll make sure that your license is renewed.
I'll do it online, it probably won't take it.
Well, that's probably right. Wait until after December 31st.
I'll wait after December 31st. Any questions?
I have a question. So when will you begin sending out notices of the reduction of the fee?
January 1st?
So you'll begin sending those out January the 1st?
Yes.
I guess my question would be, why wouldn't we start that at the same time that we would start our, why wouldn't you have your fee start January 1st along with your notifications? Why would we wait a month and a half to?
Well, we were a month and a half late in beginning it. We didn't start right at January 1st.
Understand that.
So we have to go 1 year, and then another year.
The answer is it takes a little while to turn the battleship, that we have to do the change in the computer program to recognize the new fee structure, and then we need to mail those notices out so people know what to send in.
Okay,
So that's why it went from
I got you.
to February this last time.
But you've got people who, if you've done it in a 60-day period, you're going to have people whose license will renew February the 20th or the 23rd. They've already received their notification that it's $100, right? Even though past February the 16th, it's really only 50.
Right.
Well, I think even more specifically, you can have somebody on January 1st that's paid their fee.
Well, I understand that, but well, yeah, I'm
No, but-
making a complicated issue
No,
out of
you're
nothing,
right.
but it's,
You're absolutely right. And I imagine we will have to refund people.
We'll do a refund. We'll make sure that people are
They
A
didn't
covered.
paying.
refund?
Well, not
write
for
that
you, because you're going to wait, and you're going to be right on time, but everyone else,
I thought it was impossible to get a refund.
well,
that answers my question, yes, sir,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Jerry, I thought you did a really great job of downplaying good news. It went over we're very low. It was outstanding. Yeah. Normally confetti should fall from the roof, but you pulled it off again.
Licensing Division.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. I'm Lisa Hodak, Licensing Manager. I have included the licensing statistics and updated the report this year for September and October for fiscal year 2016. And that's the new report from since the last time we met. And prior to the meeting, I passed out an auctioneer upgrade report. Mr. Oldmixon had asked about the associates who upgraded to regular auctioneers. So I've included the total population for associates as well as for auctioneers, the number of new auctioneer licenses issued, and the number of associates who have upgraded to actual auctioneers. The number of associates who have upgraded is included in the number of new auctioneer licenses issued. So I'm hoping that this report will answer some questions for you as far as upgrades. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
There was 5 in 2015 upgraded.
That began in September 1st, yes. That's when the new law went into effect that allowed them to renew associates from previously licensed.
Prior to June 14.
Yes.
That was 13.
It's 13.
Not very many. Any questions, Lisa?
Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Now, to the big.
Good morning, members.
Good morning.
Stella Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel. My, how time flies. You were last here October 9th, and we spent a good deal of time going over the rules, including the subject of internet auctions, associate auctioneers, and everything in between. Every one of you got one of these, a handout today. I know if you looked at what was sent to you in your materials, you might have been alarmed because no changes were made. But this is what was actually published and what we're asking you to hopefully recommend to our commission at the end of the day today. Globally, I can go over the changes that you made last time in October, including replacing some male terminology, he, with gender-neutral terminology. We discussed the internet auction exemption in 6730, and we made a few just basic corrections, renumbering of some things. So I can go over them each one if you'd like me to. We did receive also 2 comments from the public. One basically said they didn't want the associate auctioneer program reinstated, but that's nothing we can stop by rule. That was a statutory change. And the other one, Mr. Seaton, you said you might help me understand, but I do believe that it was a statute, that what Mr. Corbin Offill would recommend would be a statutory change. He apparently wants some kind of specialty license to sell automobiles. But if you want to enlighten the group on what he's trying to say, that would be great.
The way I read this is, I did have a note here, the auto auctioneers got this special little rule similar to what the real estate people do and cattle auctioneers and all that. He's saying since he's not really a full auctioneer for the general public, he doesn't need a license.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that'd be a statutory change. I think it's just a decision.
Well, in the new bill, it does allow specifically a licensed auctioneer to conduct sales of automobiles for people with a retail and wholesale license. And you know, the auction house definition says that you licensed as an auctioneer can't perform sales for an auction house or an auction company unless that company is also owned or managed by a licensed auctioneer. This was to help with those kind of, sort of weakens that exemption a little bit more and adds another type of auction company that a licensee can auction for, and that company doesn't have to be owned by an auctioneer, it just has to be owned by the GDN or somebody has the GDN. Yeah.
There's no question we have to have the person's license that's running the entire auction company. He's saying a bid caller, and we no longer have bid caller attached to auctioneer because auctioneer is so much more than just a bid caller. So he's trying to, I think what he's asking is, can I be a bid caller and not have a license?
Well, no,
In
because
in that particular thing. I think that's what he's asking.
in that case, it would be a statutory change again because this House Bill 2481 brought everything back to just being a bid caller.
Yeah.
That's basically the definition of licensee of someone who needs an auctioneer license now. When House Bill 3038 passed in 2013, remember it added all those, not just bid calling, but executing the contracts, negotiating the listing agreements, working anything basically in the business would require a license.
Okay.
Now it's just a bid caller.
I'm not defending, I'm not taking an opinion on this at all. It's not, it's not my ballpark. I'm just saying that's what he's asking. But I noticed you gave him an exemption for his sales tax.
Yeah. Does anyone else wish to comment on that comment? Yeah.
I just have a question for clarification. So a bid caller that's working at a wholesale motor vehicle auction, which is exempt from TDLR, does he have to have a license or not have to have a license to auctioneer for a wholesale motor vehicle auction?
He does.
He does.
This just allows him to do that, and that wholesale vehicle auction company doesn't have to be owned by a licensed auctioneer.
Okay.
I
So
was-
would the recovery fund then be in effect for a wholesale motor vehicle auctioneer?
To my knowledge, the recovery fund is in effect for any time a licensed auctioneer breaches a contract in the line of his duty, and there's some money pursuant to that contract owed to someone who's aggrieved by that auctioneer's actions.
That didn't really answer my question.
Oh.
The answer would be yes.
Yes.
Because the auctioneer is not who has a contract with anyone.
The auctioneer hopefully has some agreement or contract with the the people that run the auction company to come perform their services. So the law is pretty skeletal. I mean, it doesn't say a lot. It just basically says if a licensed auctioneer breaches a contract in the line of calling the auction or performing their duties, and there's an aggrieved party that wants to file a complaint against the recovery fund, they may. And they would have to prove that there was a contract with the auctioneer and that it was broken, whatever the auctioneer agreed to pay back. I have not personally seen what that contract may look like, but generally I would say yes, unless I saw a contract. I don't know. Yes.
There are no
What-
contracts.
Here. I'll make this, and then we probably need to move on because it's ruled he needs to have a license. Had it turned that he didn't need a license under those conditions, it would have opened up the door to a lot of other things. So I think send them a letter and say, yes, you have to have a license. I think that will bring a lot of resolutions.
Yes, sir?
Well, if he's gonna have an auction company, he needs to have an auctioneer's license. That's pretty simple.
He's not-
Unless
he
you're,
doesn't have
unless
an
you're a
auctioneer.
broker, real estate broker, or.
Don't understand
yeah.
that, but if this was specifically for an auto auction.
Right.
And what was exactly he asking?
He almost seemed to be confused between being having the GDN number and being a licensed auctioneer. So I'm going to contact him and try to help understand. But from what I can understand what he's saying, he's doing bid calling. So the bottom line is he does need a Texas auctioneer license,
he
which he
does.
apparently seems to have.
Whether,
I'm
I'm not sure what he's asking.
Yeah.
that would be whether he's a GDN or not.
He does not have an auctioneer license. And all he works at is, he wants to work, he does not currently, he wants to work for wholesale automobile auctions only.
Mhm. And do those,
And do those auctions only.
then he's required to have either the GDN type number, or he has to have a licensed auctioneer license. He can.
If
he can-
he's gonna sit on the block and escalate bids and accept bids, he's gonna have to have a license,
Yes.
Yes, that's Della's opinion.
period. Okay.
Yes.
Make sure that's what we're gonna talk about.
Doesn't a licensed auctioneer also have to have,
I would assume so.
because it says here he was not required?
No, you can get an exemption for a sales tax
You
permit.
can, okay.
That's what he's saying. I can get an exemption for a sales tax permit. Why can't I get an exemption for
For
the
being-
license as well, being as I'm working for a licensed wholesale motor vehicle auction?
And one has
And
nothing to do with the
worms
other.
if he didn't have a
Right.
license.
Or we're meaner than the comptroller.
Apples and oranges.
One thing, one thing that wasn't clear to me was, let's say John is he is a GM of an auto auction, so he's not required to have an auctioneer's license to do that function. But if he gets up on the block and starts calling bids, then he is required to have a license, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. That wasn't clear to me. Okay.
The only other change I would recommend that we make from what you, as a group, discussed at the last meeting, I would like to call your attention to section 67.30 in the new rules. And if you'll recall, and back in October, Mr. Sample brought up a hypothetical, and this talks about internet auctions. And his hypothetical was, what if there happens to be someone live bid calling through the internet, and the only way to bid on that property would be through the internet? There was no one else around, and arguably that might not even be considered live bid calling. But a person is bid calling, which may not even be something that could happen, because how could you see who's bidding? I mean, I don't know how realistic it was, but it was a good hypothetical. And we as a group, myself included, concluded that that would be regulated because there was some live bid calling. However, upon discussion with the different divisions and within our division, I believe now that that would be exempt, but the new exemption that's in 2481 that says internet auctions conducted through the internet are exempt. We had come up with the definition of what would be covered. What we proposed to you was, if there is an internet auction where there's a live bid caller and there are people in the room or in live who can also bid live and at the same time bid on the internet, that would be regulated, because it seemed really arbitrary to say that just the person who bought the property out there is treated differently than the person, same auctioneer, same auction, than the person inside. Obviously, this is a complex issue, but to make it somewhat where our enforcement team and where we could all understand it and to provide some consumer protection, we came up with the definition that the auction of property with people live inside or physically there with the auctioneer, as well as they could bid on the internet, was covered and regulated. And so I believe now, when we discussed at the last meeting, that if it was only to be bid on through the internet, I have changed our recommendation to say that that would not be covered. In other words, that would be an exempt auction. So I recommend rewording 6730 so that solely if it's inside, everybody knows that if the only people that can bid on it are through the internet, notwithstanding if there's a live person saying something, that would be exempt. So I would, any questions or discussion you might have on that. And I have some new wording proposed. To say, an auction of property conducted by live bid call, which arguably I don't know if live bid call means there's got to be people in the room, but an auction of property conducted by live bid call, if the property may also be bid upon through the internet, is subject to this chapter and Texas Occupations Code 1802, and it's not exempt under the exemption.
So it's not as written.
Right, and I would recommend this new language because I believe what we had published.
Read it again a little slower so I
Okay.
can write this in.
Okay, 6730, is everybody there? An auction of property conducted by live bid call, if the property may also be bid upon through the internet, is subject to this chapter and Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1802, and is not exempt under 1802-002-14, which is the new exemption from HB 2481 that says, it's a pretty big exemption, it just says any auction of property through the internet is exempt.
Della, can we take a moment just to make a copy of that segment that you're reading so they can have it in front of them?
So you just,
Ben, to read it.
as I read it, you're just striking the word in what you published to us, what we have. You just strike regardless of whether and replace that with if.
Well, and we put also back in. You remember we had a big discussion last time about also implies there's people bidding live and on the internet. So we took out the word also, which sort of made it very, to include any internet auction, even if there's a live bid caller.
Okay, so this is the one I received by email, It's the subsequent one that just came Friday. And this is the one that was on their dais today. Okay, and neither of these is what you're proposing.
No, this is just today so that we could talk about it, yeah.
But neither of these is what you're proposing. You're proposing something brand new.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
That'd be
Mr.
great if
Chairman,
we had that.
Yeah, if we could take a break and we'll give you guys
Okay.
copies of that. Della, what she's trying to do is to correct the record when she misspoke to answering your hypothetical. And so in an abundance of caution, she's asking that you guys consider some language that would, give the correct answer on the record. But Del, let's take a moment, let's have Delia get that. Mr. Chairman, is that okay if we get copies in front of you?
We'll take about, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Delia making her copies for the audience.
Okay, let's reconvene. Your turn.
Okay, members, Della Lindquist again, and during the break, I received some assistance from Mr. Oldmixon, and Mary, and my team, because I apparently need another brain today. We decided to sort of flip the exemption and make it a true exemption, not saying what is covered, but what would not be covered. So here's some more language for you, and see if you can live with that. An auction of property conducted by live bid call if the property is solely, like only, bid upon through the internet is not subject to this chapter or the Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1802, and is exempt under 1802-002-14, which basically says if the only way to bid on the stuff is through the internet, it is exempt. If there's people in the room or some sort of interaction between a live person and the auctioneer, and we're not going to cover every scenario today. We're going to take a lot of these internet cases probably on a case-by-case basis. But this is to just get generally clear what our intent is.
Sounds better to me.
So it would end is not subject to this chapter if it is solely bid upon through the internet.
Yes, I'll read it again. An auction of property conducted by live bid call if the property is solely bid upon through the internet is not subject to this chapter or Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1802, and is exempt under 1802.002.14, which is that internet exemption in the statute.
If we accept this rewrite, will that have to go through the public view again?
No, because even though it's different than what we published, it's less burdensome. So in other words, it would make the type of auction that we said would be regulated, not regulated. So
I'll agree to it.
yeah, I wouldn't want you to have to go through with that again.
We don't want to do that again.
Dylan? No, never mind.
Don't do that to
This
me.
works, Chris, this is great.
Are there any other questions?
Were there any other changes that were suggested by any comments at all? I mean, other than the rethinking part, I got that one, but were there any comments that led to any other suggested changes?
No, there were just those two comments.
Thank you.
Would you be willing to recommend these go to the commission?
I make a motion that you move forward on this, whatever terms
With
you need.
with the change that we made today?
With the changes we made, yeah.
Motion made by Norm Seaton, seconded by John Swaffer, that we recommend these changes be accepted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Recommended.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience.
Della, thank you for being very diligent and following through and avoiding diversions and all that. You did a wonderful
Oh,
job.
thank you. We try.
Does that also cover your topic, discussion of internet bidding and transfer of funds as it relates?
That does not. We placed it on there. My understanding, there was one of the board members that specifically wanted that agenda item on there. And so we did that to be responsive to that request.
Okay. And do we need to have that discussion?
Bill?
We- At the last meeting, I
was
believe
me.
it was you that had recommended that discussion.
I didn't request it, I
Oh.
was asked, would I? If you don't want to hear what I have to say, that's fine.
Oh, no, we do. That's why it's on the
It's
agenda.
on there so you can say it.
Well, I mean, it's very brief, and it kind of goes with what we just got through discussing. But internet bidding it was reared up in 3038, and as it's probably going to come back in eventually someday. And if y'all were in attendance to the meeting we had in August of 2014, when the room was full of a lot of people and we had this debate, one of the things we really didn't do was identify what internet bidding really is. And I don't want to sit here and discuss whether we should or whether we shouldn't, but I think as a general, and I can do this very briefly, is identify the platforms of internet bidding. So when we have this discussion in the future, or if any wording comes up, if you don't want to hear it, I could go do something. We don't have to go through this, but a lot of you may not even understand what internet bidding really is. And what I wanted to do was discuss the 4 platforms. There's 4 platforms of internet bidding. And I didn't see this distinguished when we had this big debate a year ago. And so if in our wording ever gets more confused, but one of the platforms is your time bids. These are like your eBays, things such as that. There's no way in the world we're ever going to be able to regulate that. That's where you go online, you see an item, you bid on it on an escalated bid on a timed basis, and if you have the highest bid at the end of the period, then you win the bid. That's all regulated probably by a different set of rules. It shouldn't be regulated, in my opinion, by auctioneer rules or such and things like that. The other is the live, what I call webcasting. What we just spoke of just then was live webcasting of internet bidding, where you have a live auctioneer, you have a live room full of bidders, and you have people online observing and having the opportunity to view a catalog online, view it physically by a webcasting process, and having the opportunity to push a key and escalate the bid. Where this gets a little bit vague is, like myself, if I conduct an auction, I can hire or I can secure that format from thousands of different formats that are available to us on the internet. A lot of, and these are legitimate, these work well, if they all operate under the terms and conditions that auctioneer submits. Where some of the question comes in and it gets a little bit hazy, there are facilitators out there who are not hired by auctioneers, maybe hired by the person that's conducting the sale, not the auctioneer, but maybe if I'm doing an equipment sale for a guy over here, he hires an auction online service. They come and they set up a deal. They're watching me. They're regulated by their own terms and conditions, not my terms and conditions. And this is where it gets real foggy. This is where it gets real fuzzy.
Is that, I'm sorry, Ms. Lemon, is that in that second scenario where
Yeah, this is
it
the
can
same-
deviate, it can
the-
branch off to where
Yeah.
the auctioneer has good control over, and then there's some scenarios where
I'm hired to do an auction. I sit down with my auction, my office, my people. We're doing all this. And over here sits a table full of people on the internet with a camera watching me, and they're catching bids and shoot. They'll sit there and recognize me.
Okay.
I escalate the bid just as I would from somebody in the bar.
In that scenario,
Yeah.
the bidder has signed your terms and conditions of the sale.
Not necessarily. If they've signed up online to buy.
Well, that's what I'm trying to clarify the different types.
Well-
The first type is they signed
Yes.
your terms and conditions.
If I'm conducting a sale and we contract with a facilitator, they're operating under my terms and conditions, my payment process, they work under my escrow, all this kind of stuff. The other ones are the ones that sit down here and they show up and they're doing it online. All they're doing is basically being another ringman. This is where it gets a little bit tough sometimes. They operate under their terms and conditions. They do third-party billing, and it gets a little hard sometimes to control that. They won't do that at an auction that I conduct. I'll pull their plug before I let them do that. But not a lot of people have that option. That's the kind of online auctions that we have. The third type of online auction are just catalog-type auctions. These facilitators will develop catalogs for auction websites that they can do their own type, and those are not really anything that should be concerned about. The fourth type of online bidding are tender bids, is what we call tender auctions. These are large projects that could be a large service contract, could be a large purchase, and then you have the opportunity to do a bid online by, giving all your services, your abatements, your rebates, your fees, and all this kind of stuff, and then it goes to a company. They calculate the tender and then they award it. It's all done online. That really doesn't, it's not an auction, but yet it kind of is. But it doesn't really fall. The only ones that we really, I think, should be ever be concerned about or the internet-type online auctions where bids are being accepted either through the internet or through a live auction process, that whoever's facilitating this, they operate under the rules that I have to operate under. And that means if I have to pay within 15 banking days, these people are hired by a general person. They need to be doing the same thing. If you'll read a lot of their terms and conditions, they operate off 30 days net. They operate off third-party billing. Sometimes they collect online commissions. I'll give you a great example. They're sitting there collecting a buyer's premium. I know nothing about it, and I'm doing a sale where we're not accepting a buyer's premium. Basically, I'm violating the rule because I didn't announce a 1 or 2 or 10% buyer's premium, although they've done that with an agreement online that we don't see. So that's where it gets a little snaky. I'm just putting that out there for definition. I don't want to discuss that we should, shouldn't. But those are the things I think we ought to always look at when we start talking about online bidding. I know the eBay deals, those type of auctions, there's hundreds of those sites to where you can go on and you can find something you want. Those you got to be protected by somebody else. I don't think a regulatory commission can control that. But that second scenario is the one that I
Absolutely.
think we should identify as internet bidding. So that's really all I want to say.
That's fantastic education, thank you. That's good
And I think
stuff.
that's why we wanted to talk about it more than anything, is education
good stuff.
for what is happening in our industry. Basically, you have this new vendor coming on site that is advertised your auction to his own customers. You have no terms and conditions with them. You're not taking payment from them. This gentleman is, and he's not licensed by anybody.
Nobody.
He has inserted himself in the middle of the process.
I'll give you a good
Free and
example,
clear.
then I'll stop. Did an auction here, this has been a while back, this was on some equipment. The guy putting on the sale hired us, we did all the auction management, we did everything. He hired an online company, they were from Iowa. They handled their own third-party billing, they did all that. Once we got to the point to where I had a little bit of control, I said, no, we're not gonna do that. I can't do that. I'm not gonna put my license on the line. We did this prior to the sale, we had discussion. They said it was none of my business. I said, it's all my business. And so we came to some terms very quickly, because I will pull the plug. But then they charge that guy a lot of money to do that. Those are some big fees. Those are some big online fees, and so doesn't have anything to do with us. So it's just, again, it's definition of what online bidding really is. So
One question that's in my mind is if one of those buyers that bought through the internet facilitator has a complaint, who is the complaint against?
it's probably going to be against the auctioneer.
I was gonna agree with that as
Yeah,
well.
because that's where this thing has this where it gets muddied up, and that's why we had, the meeting we had a year ago was, there was a lot of people in here, I know, there was some big companies fussing, and they had their attorneys there making sure that what they did was okay, and they are okay. But there are many, many, many of these platform facilitators. I'm not gonna sit there and name them.
Sure.
But you can go on the internet, you can see them, they operate independently, you can hire them as a benefit to your own auction. I hire them all the time. I got people that come in and we add internet bidding as part of our service, but they operate under my terms, which are the terms that I have to operate under TDLR. If not, then we're not doing business with them. And we see more and more of these people showing up wanting to do, I don't carry a camera around with me, but these people have some pretty sophisticated equipment. The internet auction is fun. It adds a new dimension. It brings in more buyers. That part I don't have a problem with as long as I can control that. I don't even know who some of these buyers are. So sometimes there's no vetting process of getting approved for bidding and stuff like that. They do it, but then they're not necessarily responsible, because if you'll read a lot of their contracts, we're not responsible for non-payment of goods. So that's where it gets scary. So be cautious of who you are, I guess would be my words. That's all I have.
Any other discussion on G?
Can I ask a question about that? This just additional education, because I'm trying to see how they might fit. If there was a person in the audience at a live bid who had a customer on the phone, and they were essentially acting as an agent for that customer, And you had ringmen or not, doesn't matter. But they were essentially transmitting to you somebody else's bid that they're an agent for. That person, that agent would have to have signed up as a bidder with you on behalf of that other person?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They do it through that online service. Here's,
No,
I
no,
get-
no, forget about the online, I'm just talking about this live auction with a person on the phone.
Oh, well, yeah, they would. They would have a bidder's number. If there was a phone bid, which is a different situation, we
Right.
have phone bids all the time, he will go sign that guy up, and we'll either be in our database or we'll gather that information before we would take him in. We wouldn't issue a buyer number unless we knew who these people were.
Okay, so the agent either provides the information of the ultimate
Yeah.
bidder or their own information? Okay,
Yeah,
Yes.
that usually happens.
okay.
I guess the last thing I could say about these type of folks is, as an auctioneer, we work for the seller.
Right.
These internet platforms actually work for the buyer.
Sure.
And that's kind of, there's a lot of polarity there when you start thinking about what it is an auction is supposed to be, is that we work for the seller, and hopefully that we have a lot of buyers there. We don't let buyers dictate the sales. We work and we sign contracts with sellers, not buyers. But internet people they represent the buyer. And so it comes a little bit, if you don't get control of that, if you don't know what you're watching, if you're not in control of your environment, there's tremendously a large segment of successful online bidding platforms. I'd say the majority of them are legitimate and they're great. There's just starting to creep in some folks that are coming in, finding a new value, added opportunity to come in and get in the auction business, not being regulated, not having any kind of idea about my terms and conditions. We won't allow it, but there are some unsuspecting people out there that don't have that option. They just get out there and they do it. And there's where but that person is going to be responsible for it ultimately since he has a license. And that's where it gets ugly, so.
And what happens with non-payment?
Well, normally that would go back to the auctioneer that has the management license that's listed. That's where it gets scary. If I've got somebody, we sell an item and it's sold on the internet and we don't get the money, I don't even know who the guy is. Guess who's responsible for that?
You are.
Well, there are two types of payment. The payment to the auctioneer, the payment to the third-party internet vendor.
We had this.
What happens when the customer pays the internet vendor, internet vendor doesn't pay the auctioneer?
Well, this is where third-party billing scares me to death, and that we're starting to see more of that. It's a service that they call it a service. I call it
Yes.
dangerous. But, they think we'll collect the money for you.
And
You
they're
don't have to
going
worry about
straight to our consigners promoting this product.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I'm not talking good, bad. I'm making trying to just, describe what internet bidding is. I think a lot of people think they don't really know what internet bidding really is. There's live internet bidding online every day, and I'd say the majority of them are good. A lot of them are live, some of them are timed, some of them are whatever. But the ones that I have cautious is the live internet bidding where you have a facilitator sitting over here setting up a program, collecting bids from people that the auctioneer with the license doesn't know who it is. So that's what we're talking about in a lot of these situations, and so it's kind of it. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, that brings us pretty close to the end.
Just a second, Jim.
Yes,
I think
sir.
we have one public comment for this section.
Oh, okay. Mr. Swaggart wants to comment on online bidding.
Lance Swigert with Swico Auctions. The one concern that begins to, when we start talking about the online bidding platform, that scares me, especially with not regulating part of it, is the fact of kind of what we talked about, Joel, of moving to regulate the auctioneer. You're regulating as we're moving from regulating the auctioneer to regulating buyers. And that's kind of the hard part of the online auction is we're taking from, right now we regulate the auctioneer and that's real easy to regulate. But the further we move into this online, we're moving to where we're saying we're having to regulate the buyers. And I think that does create some problems. And I think we have to be able to still be able to attach somehow to some kind of singular person the regulation. And we need to make sure our definitions of online can still move to say, I want to regulate this person. Instead,
To me, we're talking more about, this person is acting as an online ringman,
yeah,
but your online ringman is also accepting money.
right.
And we would, if, what would happen if you started collecting money from your ringman, letting people pay him? We would never allow that.
No.
And the ringman is going around the auctioneer straight to the seller.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're talking about the buyer so much as, now you have an online ringman charging his own,
Fees and commissions and-
collecting money in the
And
process.
so even under, so my question is, under the rules now, who is getting regulated? Are we gonna start requiring those
Online ringman.
online ringmen to be licensed, because there is a live format to that, but they're not in control of it?
And the split to me comes down to whose terms and conditions did they sign and who are they paying?
Right.
If I was to answer that question and I could put it into a rule right today, I would say that any online facilitator would would need more or less to be signing that agreement with that auctioneer and not the person that's conducting or putting on the sale. That really he shouldn't have, he's hiring somebody to bring in more buyers to his event. And if the auctioneer is not engaged and not a part of it, when we do it, we approve all bidders.
Right.
Online bidders. A lot of it's information I really don't want, but I'm not gonna sell anything, a tractor or anything for $4,000 or $15,000 to a guy I don't know who it is. And if either the online guy they may have vetted. I'll give you a great example. With this one group we use, they have to give them a credit card number, but they don't accept credit cards for payment. I said, well, so we're not gonna do that. We're gonna either, those people, I gotta know who they are. I'm gonna send them an invoice. I don't want you to send them an invoice. I'll collect. I don't want you collecting, So the regulating buyers really should be the responsibility of the auctioneer and the auction company.
Yeah. And I've had complaints of that made to me as a board member of the Texas Auctioneers Association, of saying there's these third-party companies, they're saying sold at a live auction. Come to find out that third-party company can't produce the buyer, can't produce the money. Who does the consumer, who does the seller go to for their money? Their item was sold online at a live auction. Who do they go report to? Well, there's a problem there, because is it the auctioneer? Can they report against that auctioneer? Well, the auctioneer has no control over the buyer, over the bidder, because it came from the third party site, and that third party site says, well, I don't care, it's not up to me.
We've discovered in some of the research that I've done that there are some of these companies that will accept max bids. In other words, you may be watching it, but they'll ask you to go ahead and give me a maximum bid and I'll bid on your behalf.
Yeah.
I bet you will too.
Yeah.
I can't regulate that. I don't have any earthly idea I know who's bidding, except when a ringman or I actually see a hand go up in the air. If I've got a facilitator sitting over there and he's got a 5,000 max bid and I'm sitting at 3,500, all of a sudden we go to 4 and then we go to 45 and we go to 5. Uncanny that we hit his number. I don't know that number, but the online people do. That's the trust between those buyers and this internet company.
Are they considered an auctioneer at that point?
Almost.
Because we changed auctioneer from just bid calling to a large part of the.
I think this is where our argument was developed.
No,
changed.
it's actually, this is Della Lindquist. It's actually back to just basically the bid calling. The information and stuff from 3038 largely went away, if you're executing the contract, negotiating the contract. So basically the ground zero for being an auctioneer needing a license is when you live bid call physically in the state of Texas.
So in this scenario, if there's an auctioneer, if Joel's up there and he's calling bids, and I'm sitting out, and I've registered 10 of my own customers, and they are bidding solely online to me and off of him, I would be exempt, quite possibly.
The sale would be exempt, which would mean you wouldn't need a license to do it, essentially.
But Joel is sitting there live bid calling to people in
But
the
you're,
crowd.
you're operating under my license.
You have two types of auctions taking place within the same auction.
You do, but in that moment, it becomes one auction. It is an auction
It's
that's
an
governed
auction,
by us.
and I don't care if it's online
Yeah, I
or
mean,
if it's
that's what
out
we
in the
just
hall,
defined.
it's, if I receive a bid, I'm obligated to take it. My question is, if I'm obligated to take it, what have I just taken?
That's
And
exactly right.
online doesn't give me doesn't give me a definite, look at who I'm accepting bids from. And, typically, if you want my personal opinion, I don't like online bidding, but it is a part of everything we sell now.
Sure.
I rarely do a sale that we don't have internet bidding, and it does bring a large spectrum of new buyers that we not necessarily would get, whether it's a car sale, equipment sale, cattle sale. Every livestock auction today, who doesn't operate under our terms, those are stockers and packers, every livestock auction now has online bidding. They have a camera in every location. And you'll have guys in Iowa and Indiana bidding on, drafts of cattle. That's fine, but, it's all part of what we do today. But those companies have large contracts with these, with equipment companies. I know if your car auction probably has internet bidding, it's already secured under their terms and conditions, not that of the internet provider. I'm talking about these internet platform service companies that come in and do sales. Those are the guys that I would say you need to be cautious with. Buyers, how do you regulate buyers? I'm not sure how you do that. But
Well, and no, going from that is how do we make sure that we tell our consigners, or how do we make sure the public knows that these online only aren't regulated? Or how do we make sure that we tell them they should be regulated, you should be using, or how do we tell our client, as when an auctioneer, they've already got a online platform, they're looking for the live bid guy, how do we tell them we're not going to be responsible, but we are, unfortunately, ultimately?
Well, under the rules that are proposed, if there's a live auction happening in the state of Texas, and it doesn't matter if the audience is filled with facilitators, that auction event, that auctioneer is regulated, right? So if we're protecting, consumers, being both sellers and buyers, it seems to me that the principal mechanism that we do, although it's aimed at the auctioneer, the principal service that we provide is to ensure that in fact everybody's bidding under the same disclosed terms.
Yeah.
All right? That's the one essential element, so buyers, nobody's at a disadvantage, there's no secret terms, all those kinds of things. And so one way to potentially approach that is that it doesn't matter if the whole room is filled with facilitators, every single one of them is representing buyers, if you will, okay? They're all representing their own set of buyers out there that they're going to convey those bids, but every one of them has signed up to accept the conditions that the auctioneer has put on this sale. So even if they're going to pay, even if that ultimate bidder of one of those successful facilitators is going to pay a premium to the facilitator for providing that service, they're also going to pay under the same terms and conditions that every other bidder that was set for that auction by that auctioneer, in agreement with their seller.
if that's the case, then the auctioneer's just broken one big rule. He didn't announce a buyer's premium. Because what's good for the buyer online is good for the buyer in the house.
But our rules don't. So our rules don't cover that right now. Is the point?
Well, that's why, I mean,
Yeah.
Well,
And I
I didn't
think
mean to
that,
open up a can of worms. I really wanted to do just
Consumer has
definition of
to sign
online
terms and
bidding, but
conditions of the auction.
it gets complicated before you start talking about it, because because you know, if I, and I know what I do personally, if I go in and the people who have hired me have hired an online facilitator, we have a discussion before that sale even starts. I want a list of your buyers. A lot of times they say, well, I can't give you that. Well, then I'll pull your plug. And I want my terms and conditions listed on your internet site. And I want to know if, you know, you will not be doing, you know, we don't allow them to come in there and take control of my environment. Sometimes there are, you know, bigger facilities than that you can't do that. Ultimately, it always comes back to the guy that has the license, regardless of what goes on or who does anything. That's my definition of online bidding. It's a big muddy gray area. I'd say 90% of it is good. I think 90% of it works well, but there is a small percentage of it that's starting to come back and create problems because a guy sets him up an internet site, gets him a camera, and goes around the country being hired by people putting on. They're not putting on an auction. They're just there as a webcasting service accepting bids online. So, you know, I would, if but, you know, are we going to get to the point, that was a question of 3038, or are we going to regulate online bidders? Good luck with that. I mean, online auctions, good luck with that. That will be down the line, I'm sure.
And that would be my final comment is, you know, I understand that the internet is extremely hard to regulate, but when we're talking scenarios here, the same concept needs to happen for online as live. That same regulation needs to happen at some point in time, whenever that comes about, of online as live, because you're talking the same consumer protections on both seller and buyer side. The consumer needs to be protected from the problems that can happen. And it doesn't matter if that person is sitting 3,000 miles away or that person is sitting in your room. Regulation needs to happen on both sides of it. Now, when does that, and I understand that is not the current law. I understand that's not the way it is now, but that is my opinion where it needs to go.
I do have one question. Mr. Oldmixon, you had, in your scenario, this is Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel, you said in a room full of facilitators. Did you mean it was only facilitators and the true bidders were out there somewhere? So would that be an unregulated auction if the bidding is actually all going on outside and the facilitators
that would happen.
aren't bidding?
Well, I think under the current rules as proposed, because it's a live forum, it would still be a covered auction, a regulated auction.
Are the facilitators only just the mouthpieces, though, of the people? I'm trying to learn myself.
No,
so-
no, well,
Yeah. Are the facilitators really just echoing what the real bidders are doing
yeah,
only through the internet?
yes, no, not necessarily through the internet.
Okay.
But
So there might be other people in that room besides just facilitators?
no, the scenario, and I really don't want to get caught up. All I was trying to do was make a point, is that if you want to conceptually figure out what it is, what are we regulating? We're regulating the potential for, we have auctioneers, that's what we regulate, auctioneers and auction companies, right? And we want to make sure that there's a very predictable, contractual set of circumstances that provide full disclosure and enforcement mechanisms to this particular environment on behalf of the participants in that environment, the buyers and sellers, right? If you're going to approach it from that perspective, okay, then all of these other little wild cards, if you think about what protection you're actually providing, then I think it aims you towards, okay, not necessarily, we're not regulating buyers sitting 3,000 miles away, okay? We're regulating the process by which there's predictability. And so technology is going to change it's going to continue to change. So you need principles that are kind of technology agnostic, okay, about what kind of protection are we providing, and then how do you actually implement that protection. And so one suggestion was that you might think about, if there's a facilitator in the room, you make them sign up the same terms and conditions as the sale for anybody else, and that is imposed on their principals on the other end of the phone, if you think about it as a phone or internet or whatever, as a principal-agency relationship. They're an agent in the room on behalf of all these other bidders, and on behalf of all of those bidders, they accept the same terms and conditions that the auctioneer has set for this particular auction sale. So it's just a way of thinking about the approach. And so I wasn't really trying to, other than by analogy, make a stark example to say, even if there was only facilitators in the room, if they all signed up to the same agreement as if there were live bidders in the room, okay, then you would be providing the same level of protection.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I insist on it, but I just,
Right.
not all of them have that opportunity to do that. Not all auctioneers would do that, or even know to do that, so.
A lot of these were going to be very interesting to, if we get some complaints or issues, it'll be very
Yep.
fact-based and interesting to
Yes.
unwind the transaction. So.
That's all I have.
Anything else on that subject? Moving right along to recommendations for agenda items for next meeting.
Mr. Seaton, I know.
All I wanted was a little word change, and it seemed to fall over. On, I'll see if this is even worth discussing. I'll throw it out. On, if I can find the page again. On 6725, continuing education, in Part B, it says that we need to have instructional laws and rules that regulate auctioneers.
I'm sorry, can you pull the mic a little closer to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my hearing aids, I can hear my real self real well. On continuing education, 6725, Part B, it says, including 2 hours of instruction that regulates conduct. Then when I drop down to F, then it says, but you only have to cover one or more of these laws. And I think one or more of the following needs to be struck. That's all I want to do. And I just don't think that's worth a whole agenda item and go to a public hearing and everything else. So I'm willing to just let my idea drop if you want to. In other words, why are we saying one paragraph you have to study these laws, which we should, and the other one, well, at least one of them?
Well, in order to make that change, we would have to come again for a discussion, and it would be a fairly significant rule change. So if you had wanted to, I know, to discuss it today, and I regret that the agenda item is
Yeah.
not here, but for the next meeting, we certainly can put it on and have
And if
that
we
discussion.
change that, would we have to go through the public reading again?
At some point, when the
It's
rules
not-
are up.
It's not worth it.
But we
Okay.
do have to review these
think-
rules every 4 years anyway,
Yeah.
so we can check and see where we are kind of on that
Okay.
schedule.
When we do it for other things, we can throw that in.
I think that's what that is saying, is you must have 2 hours of laws and at least one of the following. It's not saying one.
Okay, must be dedicated to instruction one or more. And I'm saying, why say that? Just leave all of them in
Because
there.
laws and rules are required, period.
Yeah. I'm not questioning that.
Okay.
I'm not
And then
even.
one or more of
I
the
don't even
following.
want that changed.
And one or more of the following.
Yeah. And I just think it should be all of the following.
You can't cover all the following in 6 hours.
Well, excuse me. I went ahead and printed these laws out that you mentioned, and you mentioned them down here in the regulations. And when I looked at those all can be covered quite well. It got 6 hours. I mean, there's not that many pages of the
They
law.
all can be, not all have to be.
That's my problem, yeah. Okay. I said, I don't think it's worth a whole lot of discussion, so I'm not gonna put that on the agenda item for next time.
Very
Thank you,
good.
though.
Before we have any more discussion on that, when will the next meeting be?
Mr. Chairman, there's not
To
a.
be
there's nothing-
determined?
Huh? To be determined. And there's nothing that's driving it like we had with the, getting these rules ready for bill implementation, so.
Okay.
It seems like though, probably at some point down the road, we'll be talking internet, maybe.
Yeah.
Seems to be the subject du jour.
Hopefully not, but.
Oh, again, I'm there. I'm with that one.
Hopefully not.
I'm not gonna bring it up.
But it's just, this is more of an education deal than anything.
Joe, that was
of what's
fantastic,
happening.
though. It really was. That
Well,
was a
according to
great-
new laws, we can have this meeting on the internet.
That's right, that's right.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Norm Seaton,
Second.
seconded by Joel Lemley to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign. Meeting is adjourned at 10:35.